A lonely millionaire battling Alzheimer's opened the gate for a fierce stray Pitbull. What seemed like a fatal mistake turned into something no one could have predicted. The ancient mansion on the outskirts of Charleston, South Carolina, stood like a silent sentinel against the passage of time. Its weathered facade and sprawling grounds told stories of better days, when laughter and life filled its halls. Now, it served as both home and fortress to Richard Caldwell, a 78-year-old millionaire whose mind had begun to drift away like autumn leaves in the wind. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us from which city you're watching us. We're keeping it going. Richard spent his days in a routine as predictable as the grandfather clock that stood in his study, its pendulum marking time with methodical precision. Each morning, David Carter, his caregiver, would arrive promptly at 7, carrying a leather bag containing medications and a forced smile that never quite reached his eyes. The old man would watch through the library window as David's car pulled up the gravel driveway, the sound of tires on stone a daily reminder of his dependence on others. The mansion's dusty corridors held memories that Richard could no longer fully grasp. Photographs of happier times lined the walls, images of his late wife Margaret, whose absence left an ache that even time couldn't heal. The sunlight filtering through the tall windows cast pale shadows across the marble floors, creating patterns that seemed to dance and shift like fragments of his scattered thoughts. Emily Hayes, a kind-hearted neighbor and longtime family friend, was the only other regular visitor to the mansion. Her visits brought brief moments of clarity to Richard's clouded mind, like rays of sunshine breaking through storm clouds. She would bring fresh flowers and stories of the outside world, patiently repeating herself when Richard's attention wandered or his memory failed him. On this particular afternoon, the Charleston sky had opened up, releasing a steady downpour that drummed against the mansion's windows. Richard sat in his favorite armchair, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass, when an unfamiliar sound cut through the monotony of the falling rain. It was a persistent scratching at the main gate, accompanied by occasional whimpers that carried across the wet grounds. Despite the countless warnings about never opening the gates without supervision, something about those sounds stirred something deep within Richard's consciousness. With surprising determination, he rose from his chair and made his way through the house, his steps slow but purposeful. The rain had intensified by the time he reached the main gate, soaking through his cardigan as he fumbled with the rusty lock. There, standing on the other side of the iron bars, was a large Pitbull. The dog's muscular frame bore the marks of a hard life on the streets. Scars crisscrossed its body, and its coat was matted from the rain, yet its eyes held an intelligence that captured Richard's attention immediately. The dog didn't bark or growl, it simply stood there, returning Richard's gaze with an intensity that seemed to transcend the usual barriers between man and beast. In a moment of clarity that surprised even himself, Richard spoke softly. Atlas. The name had come to him unbidden, like a message from his past self. The dog's ears perked up at the sound, and as Richard swung the gate open, Atlas stepped forward with a dignity that belied his bedraggled appearance. Together, they made their way back to the house, the dog's wet paws leaving prints on the marble floor that David would later fuss over. But Richard didn't care about the flaws or the rules, or the countless reasons why bringing a stray dog into the mansion was inadvisable. For the first time in months, he felt truly present in the moment, anchored by the steady presence of his new companion. Atlas quickly settled into the rhythm of the household, though his presence created ripples in the carefully maintained routine. David's initial dismay at finding a large Pitbull in the house was evident, though he masked it with professional courtesy. But there was something in the way the dog watched the caregiver that suggested more than simple animal instinct. Atlas's eyes would follow David's every movement, his muscular body tensing slightly whenever the man came too close to Richard. Emily's reaction to the new addition was markedly different. During her next visit, she observed with amazement how Richard seemed more focused, more present when Atlas was near. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense when Richard's mind was starting to drift, gently nudging his hand or resting his head on the old man's knee, bringing him back to the present moment. As the days passed, Atlas became more than just a companion. He became a guardian. His protective instincts manifested in subtle ways. the way he positioned himself between Richard and any visitors, how he would patrol the corridors at night, and most notably his peculiar interest in certain areas of the house. The dog would often stop at specific spots, sniffing intently at walls or floorboards, as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. One evening, as the sun set behind the Charleston oaks and cast long shadows through the windows, Richard held an old pocket watch in his trembling hands. In a rare moment of lucidity, he began murmuring about numbers and secrets hidden behind false walls. David, who had been arranging medications nearby, suddenly showed an unusual interest in Richard's ramblings. Atlas, lying at Richard's feet, raised his head and fixed his eyes on the caregiver, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The following days brought subtle but unsettling changes to the mansion's atmosphere. Emily, during her regular visits, began noticing small details that seemed out of place. Important documents that Richard kept in his study started disappearing, only to reappear in different locations days later. Drawers that were usually kept locked were found partially open, their contents slightly disturbed, as if someone had been searching for something specific. Atlas's behavior became increasingly alert. The Pitbull developed a habit of investigating certain areas of the house with remarkable persistence. He would spend hours near the study's eastern wall, his nose working overtime, as if trying to communicate something to anyone paying attention. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the dog's actions were more than mere animal curiosity. There was an almost human intelligence behind his methodical inspection of the mansion. David's demeanor had also shifted since Atlas's arrival. The caregiver's usually precise routine became erratic. He would arrive at odd hours, claiming traffic delays or personal emergencies. Emily often caught him studying the mansion's layout with an intensity that seemed inappropriate for someone who had worked there for years. More concerning were the hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended whenever anyone approached. One rainy afternoon, Emily arrived to find Richard in an unusually agitated state. Atlas sat beside him, more alert than ever, his muscular body tense with nervous energy. Richard clutched his old pocket watch, turning it over and over in his hands as he spoke in fragments about numbers and patterns. "The wall," he kept saying. "Behind the wall." Margaret knew. "The numbers tell the story." Emily tried to make sense of his words, but David quickly appeared, administering a sedative that soon had Richard dozing in his chair. As the old man's grip loosened, the pocket watch slipped from his fingers. David reached for it, but Atlas was quicker, snatching it up in his gentle jaws and carrying it to Emily. The caregiver's face flickered with annoyance before smoothing into his usual professional mask. Later that evening, while David was occupied in another part of the house, Emily examined the watch more closely. Its golden surface was worn with age, but something about the way Richard had been handling it suggested it held more than just sentimental value. As she turned it over, she noticed faint scratches on the back, numbers barely visible that had been deliberately etched into the metal. Atlas watched her examination with keen interest, his intelligent eyes moving between the watch and Emily's face. Suddenly, he stood and moved toward the study's eastern wall, the same spot he had been investigating for days. He pawed gently at the wooden panels, then looked back at Emily expectantly. Following his lead, she ran her fingers along the wall's surface, feeling for anything unusual. The discovery of a hairline crack in the paneling sent a shiver down her spine. It was almost invisible to the naked eye, but once found, impossible to ignore. Emily's heart raced as she realized the implications. There was indeed something hidden behind these walls, something significant enough to warrant such careful concealment. Before she could investigate further, the sound of approaching footsteps forced her to step back. David entered the study, his eyes narrowing slightly at finding Emily so close to the wall. "Mr. Caldwell needs his evening medications," he announced, his tone professional but with an underlying edge that made Atlas's ears flatten against his head. That night, Emily's dreams were troubled by images of hidden passages and secret codes. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled onto something much bigger than simple household irregularities. The next morning, she arrived at the mansion earlier than usual, determined to piece together the puzzle that Richard's fragmented memories had hinted at. She found the house in unexpected disarray. Several rooms showed signs of having been searched, though nothing appeared to be missing. In Richard's study, Books had been pulled from shelves and replaced hastily, their spines no longer perfectly aligned. Atlas met her at the door, his body language communicating urgency. He led her to Richard's bedroom, where the old man sat in his wheelchair, staring out the window with unusual intensity. "Emily?" he said without turning around, his voice clearer than it had been in weeks. "Margaret left something important. The watch. The numbers. They're the key." Before he could continue, David appeared in the doorway, a look of concern masking something harder in his eyes. "Mr. Caldwell needs his rest," he insisted, already preparing another dose of medication. Emily left the room reluctantly, but not before noticing how Atlas positioned himself between Richard and David, his protective instincts clearly on high alert. In the hallway, she nearly collided with a man she had never seen before. Tall, well-dressed, with a smile that seemed practiced rather than genuine. He introduced himself as Nathan Caldwell, Richard's distant nephew, explaining that he had come to check on his uncle's welfare. Something about Nathan's arrival sent warning signals through Emily's mind. His timing seemed too convenient, his charm too calculated. As she watched him interact with Richard, she noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the room, as if searching for something. More telling was Atlas's reaction. The usually calm dog maintained a rigid vigilance whenever Nathan was near, his muscles tensed for action. That evening, as Emily prepared to leave, she found a partially burned letter in the study's fireplace. Though most of it was destroyed, a few legible fragments mentioned a safe and a password that only Richard would know. The pieces of the puzzle were there, but she needed time to fit them together. Time that, judging by Nathan's sudden appearance and David's increasingly suspicious behavior, might be running out. A fierce storm descended upon Charleston that evening, the kind that made the old mansion creak and groan like a living thing. The power flickered ominously as Emily made her way through the dimly lit corridors, Atlas padding silently beside her. The dog's behavior had become increasingly agitated throughout the day, his protective instincts seemingly heightened by the oppressive atmosphere. The sudden appearance of Nathan Caldwell had created an undercurrent of tension in the household. His supposedly impromptu visit raised more questions than answers, especially given his keen interest in Richard's study and the old pocket watch that had become central to the unfolding mystery. Emily had observed how he would linger near the eastern wall when he thought no one was watching, his fingers tracing patterns on the wooden panels as if searching for something. David's reaction to Nathan's presence was equally telling. The usually composed caregiver appeared increasingly nervous, his movements jerky and uncertain. Emily had caught them in whispered conversations that abruptly ceased whenever she approached. Atlas, ever vigilant, would position himself strategically whenever the two men were near Richard, his muscular frame a living barrier between them and the vulnerable old man. During a particularly loud thunderclap, the mansion's electricity finally surrendered to the storm's fury, plunging everything into darkness. Emily was in the library when it happened, reviewing some old family photographs she'd found tucked away in a drawer. As her eyes adjusted to the sudden darkness, Atlas's low growl caught her attention. The dog was staring intently at the doorway, his posture alert and defensive. Footsteps echoed through the darkened corridor, too many sets to belong to just one person. Emily heard Nathan's voice, uncharacteristically sharp, followed by David's urgent whispers. They seemed to be searching for something, or someone. Atlas nudged Emily's hand, urging her to follow him away from the approaching voices. As they moved silently through the shadows, Emily realized with growing alarm that Richard was no longer in his bedroom. Atlas led her up the creaking stairs toward the attic, his sure-footed guidance preventing her from stumbling in the darkness. The storm's fury seemed to intensify as they climbed higher, wind howling through the mansion's ancient bones. They found Richard in the attic, trembling and disoriented. The sight of loose ropes on the floor near him sent a chill down Emily's spine that had nothing to do with the storm's cold breath. Atlas immediately positioned himself protectively in front of Richard, while Emily tried to make sense of the scene before her. The attic's musty air was thick with tension as David suddenly appeared in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the emergency lights from the corridor below. His explanation about searching for Richard throughout the house rang hollow, especially given the evidence of restraint on the floor. Atlas's sustained growl conveyed what Emily was thinking. Something was deeply wrong with this situation. Through the chaos of the storm, Emily's mind raced to connect the pieces of this increasingly complex puzzle. The pocket watch with its mysterious numbers, the wall in the study that Atlas kept drawing attention to, the convenient arrival of Nathan, and now this troubling scene in the attic. All of it pointed to something far more sinister than simple concern for an elderly relative. As they helped Richard back to his room, Emily noticed how he clutched at the pocket watch, his fingers tracing the numbers on its back with surprising precision, despite his usual tremors. In a moment of clarity, he grabbed Emily's hand and whispered, "Margaret knew. She always knew they would come. The wall. Behind the wall." Safety. Nathan appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his usual polished demeanor slightly disheveled. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Emily supporting Richard, with Atlas standing guard beside them. "Uncle Richard should be in bed," he said smoothly, though there was an edge to his voice that set Atlas's ears back. "David has his evening medications ready." Emily watched as Nathan produced a stack of documents from his briefcase, explaining that they were routine papers requiring Richard's signature, nothing more than standard estate management matters. But Atlas's reaction to the documents was anything but routine. The dog's hackles raised, and he positioned himself firmly between Nathan and Richard, as if sensing a threat in those innocent-looking papers. Later that night, as the storm began to subside, Emily discovered something that made her blood run cold. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in Richard's study, she found a letter written in Margaret's elegant hand. Though parts were faded with age, the message was clear. She had anticipated attempts to manipulate Richard's vulnerable state and had left safeguards in place to protect him and his legacy. The letter mentioned a hidden safe, its location known only to Richard, and encoded in a series of numbers. Numbers that Emily now realized matched those etched onto the back of the pocket watch. But as she studied the letter more closely, she heard movement in the corridor outside. Atlas's warning growl told her they weren't alone in their late-night investigation. The following morning dawned with an eerie calm after the storm. Puddles scattered across the mansion's grounds reflected the pale sunlight, while fallen leaves and branches told tales of the night's tempest. Inside, Emily arrived early, her mind still processing the discoveries of the previous evening. Atlas greeted her at the door, his usual protective demeanor now tinged with an urgency she hadn't seen before. Nathan had already established himself in the mansion's morning routine, reviewing documents at the dining room table while sipping expensive coffee. His designer suit and perfectly styled hair created a stark contrast with the mansion's weathered interior. Every so often his eyes would dart toward the study, where Richard sat with David attending to his morning medications. Emily watched as Nathan approached Richard with another stack of papers, his voice honey smooth as he explained the need for more signatures. "Just routine matters, Uncle Richard," he said, placing a pen in the elderly man's trembling hand. "Nothing to worry about. We're taking care of everything." Atlas, who had been lying near Richard's feet, immediately stood at attention, his muscles tense beneath his scarred coat. Before Richard could sign, Emily intervened with a question about breakfast preferences, buying time while she observed Nathan's barely concealed frustration. The pocket watch sat on the table nearby, its worn surface catching the morning light. Emily noticed how Nathan's gaze kept returning to it, his fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the stack of papers. Later that morning, while Nathan was occupied with a phone call in the garden, Emily took the opportunity to examine the study's eastern wall more closely. Atlas stayed by the door, his posture alert, watching for any approaching footsteps. As her fingers traced the wooden panels, she found what they had been looking for, a slight depression that felt different from the surrounding wood. The pocket watch, which she had carefully borrowed from Richard's room, felt heavy in her hand. The numbers etched on its back had to mean something. As she studied them more closely, she realized they weren't random scratches but a carefully conceived pattern. Atlas's excited whine drew her attention to a small, almost invisible seam in the paneling. Before she could investigate further, David's voice echoed from the hallway, accompanied by Nathan's measured footsteps. Emily quickly stepped away from the wall, pretending to dust the bookshelves as they entered. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly at finding her in the study, but his voice remained pleasant as he discussed changing Richard's medication schedule with David. Throughout the day, Emily observed the subtle dance of power and control playing out in the mansion. Nathan would hover near Richard, speaking in soothing tones while presenting document after document for signature. David seemed to fade into the background, though Emily noticed how he would appear at crucial moments, medication ready, whenever Richard showed signs of questioning Nathan's requests. Atlas remained a constant guardian, his behavior becoming increasingly protective. The dog would position himself strategically in rooms, always maintaining a clear line of sight to Richard, while keeping both Nathan and David in his field of vision. His reactions to their movements seemed almost calculated, as if he understood the complex dynamics at play. During the afternoon, Emily discovered a hidden compartment in Richard's desk drawer, containing old photographs of Margaret. In one image, she stood in front of the study's eastern wall, her hand resting on a specific panel, her smile holding secrets. On the back of the photo, written in Margaret's elegant hand, were the words, "Remember the numbers, my love. They keep our treasure safe." As evening approached, Nathan announced his intention to stay at the mansion indefinitely, citing concern for his uncle's well-being. Emily watched as he began to establish himself, moving his belongings into one of the guest rooms, coincidentally the one closest to Richard's study. David seemed unusually accommodating to this arrangement, helping Nathan settle in while maintaining his professional demeanor. That night, as Emily prepared to leave, she overheard a heated, whispered conversation between Nathan and David in the kitchen. Their words were too low to make out clearly, but their body language spoke volumes. Nathan appeared to be issuing instructions, his usual charm replaced by cold authority, while David nodded subserviently, occasionally glancing over his shoulder. Atlas's behavior had become more insistent, especially around the study. The dog would scratch gently at the eastern wall, then look at Emily with an intelligence that seemed to transcend his canine nature. She realized that time might be running out to uncover whatever secret lay hidden within the mansion's walls. Nathan's increasing presence and David's compliant behavior suggested their plans were accelerating. As she walked to her car, Emily clutched a small notebook containing her observations and theories. The numbers from the pocket watch, when combined with the clues from Margaret's photograph, were starting to form a pattern, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was racing against an invisible clock, trying to solve a puzzle while the pieces were being deliberately scattered by unseen hands. The next day arrived with a sense of mounting tension in the old mansion. Emily had spent a sleepless night analyzing the information she'd gathered, and her early morning arrival coincided with an unusual scene. Nathan was already awake, engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion with David in the garden. Their conversation ceased abruptly when Atlas's warning bark announced Emily's presence. Richard seemed more lucid than usual that morning, his eyes following Nathan's movements with unexpected clarity. During breakfast, he kept touching the pocket watch, his fingers tracing patterns that Emily now recognized as matching the mysterious numbers on its back. Atlas remained unusually close to Richard, occasionally nudging his hand away from documents that Nathan repeatedly tried to place before him. Emily used the morning hours to investigate the study more thoroughly, while Nathan was occupied with business calls. Atlas kept watch at the door as she examined the eastern wall panel by panel. Her fingers found a slight irregularity in one section, a barely perceptible difference in texture that wouldn't be noticeable without careful inspection. The breakthrough came when she aligned the watch's numbered sequence with the pattern of wooden panels. Something clicked softly within the wall, and a small section moved slightly inward. Emily's heart raced as she realized she had discovered the entrance to a hidden compartment. Before she could investigate further, Atlas's low growl warned of approaching footsteps. Nathan entered the study, his usual polished smile in place. "Fascinating old house, isn't it?" he remarked, eyes scanning the room. "So many secrets in these walls." The double meaning in his words wasn't lost on Emily. Atlas positioned himself between them, his stance protective but not aggressive. Throughout the day, Emily observed Nathan's increasing frustration as Richard continued to resist signing the documents. David hovered nearby, suggesting additional medications that might help calm Uncle Richard's nerves. But Atlas's presence seemed to give Richard strength, the dog's unwavering loyalty acting as an anchor for his fragmented memories. In the late afternoon, Emily made an excuse to return to the study. This time she came prepared with Margaret's old photographs and the decoded sequence from the watch. As she worked on the panel, Atlas suddenly became alert, his attention focused on the garden below. Through the window, Emily spotted David, hurriedly burying something near the old oak tree. The hidden compartment finally yielded to the correct sequence of pressure points, revealing a sophisticated electronic keypad. Emily's fingers trembled as she input the numbers from the watch. A soft click echoed through the study, and a larger section of the wall swung inward silently. Behind the panel lay a small chamber, its contents hidden in shadow. Emily's flashlight revealed stacks of documents, legal papers, and a sealed envelope addressed to Richard in Margaret's handwriting. The papers detailed elaborate financial transactions and what appeared to be evidence of a long-planned scheme to take control of Richard's estate. A noise in the hallway forced Emily to quickly close the panel, her heart pounding. Nathan appeared in the doorway moments later, his expression darkening at finding her near the eastern wall again. "You seem very interested in this room," he observed, his tone carefully neutral. Atlas moved to Emily's side, his presence a silent warning. That evening, during dinner, Nathan announced his plans to have Richard's affairs professionally reassessed. "For his own protection, of course," he added smoothly. "Uncle Richard needs proper management of his estate now that his condition has deteriorated." David nodded in agreement, already reaching for the medicine cabinet. Emily watched as Richard's hands began to shake, but not from his usual tremors. There was fear in his eyes now, a recognition of the trap slowly closing around him. Atlas pressed closer to his chair, offering silent support as Nathan continued to outline his plans for restructuring the estate. Later that night, as Emily prepared to leave, she found a crumpled note in the study's wastepaper basket. It contained hastily scribbled coordinates and vague instructions about a financial arrangement. The handwriting matched several documents she had seen in the hidden chamber. Atlas's behavior became increasingly urgent as the evening wore on. The dog seemed to be trying to communicate something beyond the immediate danger. He kept moving between the study and the garden, particularly the area where David had been seen burying something earlier. Emily realized that there might be more evidence hidden within the mansion's grounds, clues that could unravel the entire conspiracy. The early morning mist clung to the mansion's grounds as Emily returned the next day. Atlas was waiting by the garden gate, his behavior more purposeful than ever. The dog led her directly to the spot where David had been seen burying something the previous afternoon. The earth was still loose, showing signs of recent disturbance. Emily glanced around cautiously before following Atlas's lead. The dog began to dig carefully, his powerful paws moving with surprising precision. Within minutes, they uncovered a wooden box, its surface damp from the soil but otherwise intact. Inside, Emily found a golden key and a handwritten letter from Margaret, preserved in a waterproof sleeve. The letter's contents sent a chill down Emily's spine. Margaret had anticipated attempts to manipulate Richard's condition, leaving behind a trail of evidence and safeguards. The letter detailed the exact location of crucial documents that would expose the entire scheme. Atlas watched intently as Emily read, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand the gravity of their discovery. Inside the mansion, Nathan had already begun his morning routine of pressuring Richard with more documents. "These need your immediate attention, Uncle," he insisted, his charm wearing thin with impatience. David stood nearby, medication tray at the ready, exchanging meaningful glances with Nathan whenever Richard showed signs of resistance. Emily carefully secured the box's contents in her bag before entering the house. Atlas resumed his protective position near Richard, while Emily observed Nathan's increasingly aggressive attempts to secure signatures. The morning light streaming through the windows cast strange shadows on the study's eastern wall, where the hidden chamber held its secrets. As the day progressed, Emily noticed David making frequent trips to his car, carrying folders and what appeared to be electronic equipment. Atlas's attention was particularly focused on these movements, his body tensing each time David passed through the front door. The dog's instincts had proven remarkably accurate throughout this ordeal, and Emily had learned to trust his reactions. During lunch, Richard experienced a moment of startling clarity. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice stronger than usual. She knew. She protected everything. Nathan's hand tightened around his water glass while David quickly approached with additional medication. Before they could intervene, Atlas created a distraction by knocking over a side table, giving Emily precious seconds to observe Richard's full reaction. The afternoon brought unexpected developments as Emily discovered more of Margaret's careful preparations. Hidden throughout the mansion were subtle clues, each leading to another piece of the puzzle. The golden key from the garden box matched a small lockbox concealed behind a loose brick in the library fireplace. Inside, she found detailed records of suspicious financial transactions and evidence of a coordinated plan to seize control of Richard's assets. Nathan's frustration became increasingly evident as his carefully constructed plan began to show cracks. Emily overheard him having a heated phone conversation in the garden, his usually smooth voice sharp with anger. "Things are taking too long," he hissed into the phone. "The old man's dog is becoming a problem, and that neighbor woman keeps interfering." Atlas's behavior shifted subtly throughout the day, his movements becoming more strategic. He would guide Emily to specific locations within the mansion, each one revealing another layer of Margaret's protective measures. The dog's understanding of the situation seemed almost supernatural, as if he were following instructions laid out long ago. In the study, Emily finally pieced together the significance of the numbers on Richard's pocket watch. They weren't just the combination to the hidden chamber. They were coordinates to a series of hidden caches throughout the property, each containing vital evidence of Nathan and David's scheme. As evening approached, Emily made a shocking discovery in Margaret's old desk calendar. Hidden between its pages was a detailed account of suspicious activities she had observed in the months before her departure. The entries painted a clear picture of a methodical plan to take advantage of Richard's declining health, with Nathan's name appearing frequently in the margins. David's increasingly nervous behavior suggested he sensed the mounting pressure. Emily caught him shredding documents in the kitchen, his usual composed demeanor cracking under stress. Atlas watched from the doorway, his presence a silent reminder of the protection surrounding Richard. Later that night, as dark clouds gathered over Charleston, Emily prepared to confront the conspirators with the evidence she had gathered. Atlas stayed close to Richard, while Emily organized Margaret's carefully preserved documents. The old mansion seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the final act of this complex drama to unfold. The tension in the mansion had reached a breaking point. Emily arrived early that morning, armed with the evidence she had gathered from Margaret's hidden caches. The Charleston sun was barely peeking over the horizon as she made her way up the gravel driveway, Atlas appearing silently beside her car as if he had been expecting her arrival. Inside, the house was unusually quiet. Nathan's door remained closed, though Emily could hear muffled conversations through the thick walls. David was already in Richard's room, administering what he claimed were routine morning medications. Atlas's ears perked up at the sound of Richard's confused protests, his muscular body tensing as he monitored the situation from the hallway. Emily used this time to verify her discoveries from the previous day. The documents from the garden box and fireplace cache painted a disturbing picture of long-term manipulation. Financial records showed a pattern of suspicious transfers, all carefully orchestrated to take advantage of Richard's declining mental state. Margaret's meticulous notes revealed that she had been tracking these activities long before her departure. In the study, Emily found Richard sitting alone, staring at his pocket watch with unusual focus. "Emily," he said, his voice clearer than it had been in weeks, "Margaret left something important. The numbers, they're not just for the wall." Atlas padded over to Richard's side, resting his head on the old man's knee in a gesture of support. Before Richard could continue, Nathan burst into the room, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. "Uncle Richard," he announced, "we need to finalize those documents today. It's crucial for the estate's protection." His voice carried an edge of desperation that hadn't been there before. Emily watched as Nathan spread more papers across Richard's desk, his hands moving with barely contained urgency. David appeared moments later, suggesting that Richard might need something to help him focus on the important decisions ahead. Atlas's low growl reflected the tension building in the room. Throughout the morning, Emily carefully documented every interaction, noting how Nathan and David worked in tandem to pressure Richard. The dog's protective instincts seemed to intensify with each passing hour, his attention divided between guarding Richard and monitoring the conspirators' movements. A breakthrough came when Emily discovered Margaret's private journal hidden behind a loose panel in the library. The entries detailed her growing suspicions about Nathan's sudden interest in Richard's affairs and David's willing compliance in the scheme. More importantly, it contained specific instructions about a series of safety measures she had put in place. As Emily read through the journal, Atlas suddenly became alert, his attention focused on the garden. Through the window, she spotted David engaged in another secretive phone conversation, his free hand gesturing animatedly as he paced among the overgrown roses. The dog's reaction suggested there was more to discover in the garden area. Following Atlas's lead, Emily made her way outside during lunch when Nathan was distracted with more phone calls. The dog led her to a weathered garden shed, its door partially hidden by climbing vines. Inside, tucked between old tools and gardening supplies, they found a metal strongbox bearing Margaret's initials. The box contained what appeared to be the final pieces of Margaret's protective puzzle: detailed records of conversations, transactions, and a series of letters outlining her suspicions about Nathan's true intentions. More significantly, it held evidence of David's initial reluctance to participate in the scheme, followed by his eventual cooperation after receiving substantial financial incentives. As the afternoon wore on, Emily noticed increasing signs of strain in both Nathan and David's behavior. Their coordinated efforts to manipulate Richard became more obvious, less careful. Nathan's charm slipped more frequently, revealing glimpses of the calculating individual beneath the polished exterior. Atlas's vigilance never wavered. The dog seemed to anticipate their movements, positioning himself strategically to interrupt their attempts to isolate Richard. His actions appeared almost choreographed, as if following a plan laid out long ago by Margaret herself. In a quiet moment, Emily found Richard in the conservatory, Atlas faithfully by his side. The old man's eyes held a glimmer of his former sharpness as he spoke about Margaret's foresight. "She knew they would come," he murmured. "She prepared, protected everything." His hand rested on Atlas's head, drawing strength from the dog's unwavering presence. The day's discoveries had equipped Emily with a comprehensive understanding of the situation, but she knew that confronting Nathan and David would require careful timing. As storm clouds gathered on the horizon, she organized the evidence, preparing for the decisive moment when all would be revealed. The afternoon sky darkened over Charleston as thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside the mansion, Emily worked methodically to piece together the final elements of Margaret's protective network. The evidence she had gathered painted a clear picture of Nathan and David's elaborate scheme to gain control of Richard's fortune through manipulation and deception. Atlas's behavior had taken on an even more focused intensity. The dog moved through the mansion with purpose, as if aware that they were approaching a crucial moment. His attention remained particularly fixed on the study's eastern wall, where the hidden chamber held its secrets, and on Richard, who seemed to be experiencing more frequent moments of clarity. Nathan's increasing agitation was evident in every movement. His perfectly maintained facade had begun to crack, revealing glimpses of desperation beneath the polished surface. Emily observed him making numerous phone calls from various corners of the property, his voice dropping to harsh whispers whenever anyone approached. "The papers must be signed today," Nathan insisted during dinner, placing yet another stack of documents before Richard. "It's for the best, Uncle. You understand that, don't you?" His tone carried an edge of threat beneath the practiced concern. Atlas, stationed beside Richard's chair, lifted his head and fixed Nathan with an unwavering stare. David hovered nearby, medical bag at the ready, suggesting that Richard might need something to calm his nerves before reviewing the important papers. But Emily noticed how the caregiver's hands trembled slightly as he prepared the medications, his usual clinical detachment slipping to reveal underlying anxiety. As evening approached, Emily made a crucial discovery in Margaret's journal. Hidden between its pages was a detailed map of the mansion's grounds, marked with specific locations and corresponding dates. Each mark aligned perfectly with the numerical sequence from Richard's pocket watch, creating a comprehensive guide to Margaret's network of hidden evidence. The storm outside intensified, its wild energy matching the mounting tension within the mansion's walls. Lightning illuminated the study in sharp bursts as Emily examined the map more closely. Atlas stayed by her side, his muscular frame alert to every sound and movement in the house. Richard sat in his favorite armchair, the pocket watch clutched in his trembling hands. "Margaret knew," he repeated, his voice stronger than usual. "She saw what they were planning. Protected everything." Nathan's head snapped up at these words, his expression darkening as he exchanged a meaningful look with David. Emily used the cover of the storm to investigate another location marked on Margaret's map. In the library, behind a panel of ancient leather-bound books, she found a small safe. The combination, when aligned with the watch's numerical sequence, yielded yet another cache of documents. These ones detailing specific instances of Nathan's attempts to manipulate Richard's finances long before his current condition. Atlas's sudden bark drew Emily's attention to movement in the garden. Through the rain-streaked windows, she could see David hurriedly retrieving something from his car. The dog's reaction suggested this wasn't a routine errand, and Emily quickly documented the suspicious activity in her growing file of evidence. Later that evening, as lightning continued to flash across the Charleston sky, Emily overheard a heated argument between Nathan and David in the kitchen. Their voices, raised above the storm's fury, revealed cracks in their alliance. "This is taking too long," Nathan hissed. "We need those signatures before she finds—" The rest of his words were lost in a crash of thunder. Atlas guided Emily to Richard's room, where they found the old man more alert than he had been in days. "The wall," he whispered, pointing toward his study. "Margaret left everything there, behind the wall." His eyes held a clarity that seemed to pierce through the fog of his condition, focusing on some distant memory. Emily spent the next hours organizing all the evidence she had gathered. Margaret's careful planning had created a comprehensive record of Nathan and David's scheme, from initial suspicious activities to current manipulation attempts. The storm's intensity seemed to mirror the growing tension in the house as Emily prepared to confront the conspirators with the truth. As midnight approached, Atlas's behavior changed subtly. The dog moved restlessly between Richard's room and the study, as if sensing that events were reaching a critical point. Emily knew that the time for revelation was drawing near, but she had to move carefully. Nathan and David's increasingly desperate actions suggested they might take drastic measures if cornered. The storm continued to rage outside the mansion as midnight approached. Emily stood in the study, carefully examining the eastern wall where the hidden chamber lay concealed. Atlas remained by her side, his presence both protective and encouraging as she worked to decode the final sequence of numbers from Richard's pocket watch. Nathan's earlier behavior had grown increasingly erratic throughout the evening. His polished facade had crumbled significantly, replaced by barely concealed desperation. Emily had observed him making frantic phone calls from various corners of the mansion, his voice rising above the storm's fury before falling to urgent whispers. David, too, showed signs of unraveling. His usual precise movements had become jerky and uncertain, his medical bag clutched like a shield as he moved through the mansion's shadowy corridors. The alliance between the two men appeared to be straining under the weight of their failing scheme. Richard sat in his wheelchair near the study window, watching the storm with unusual focus. "Margaret always said the truth would come out," he murmured, his voice carrying a strength that had been absent for months. Atlas's ears perked up at his words, the dog's attention divided between Richard and the eastern wall. Emily's fingers traced the intricate patterns of the wooden panels, following the sequence she had discovered in Margaret's journal. The combination of numbers from the pocket watch aligned perfectly with subtle marks in the wood, marks that would be invisible to anyone not specifically looking for them. A soft click echoed through the study as the hidden panel finally yielded to the correct sequence. Emily's heart raced as she carefully opened the concealed door, revealing the chamber that Margaret had prepared. Inside, organized with meticulous precision, lay the final pieces of evidence that would expose Nathan and David's elaborate conspiracy. Atlas's sudden alertness warned Emily of approaching footsteps moments before Nathan appeared in the doorway. His carefully maintained charm vanished completely at the sight of the open chamber. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp with panic. David appeared behind him, medical bag clutched tightly to his chest. Emily stood her ground, supported by Atlas's protective presence. The dog positioned himself between her and the two men, his posture conveying clear warning without aggression. Richard watched the scene unfold from his position by the window, his eyes showing comprehension of the mounting confrontation. Inside the chamber, Emily discovered detailed records of every suspicious transaction Nathan had attempted to orchestrate. Margaret's careful documentation revealed a pattern of manipulation that had begun long before Richard's condition had deteriorated. Financial statements, correspondence, and legal documents formed a comprehensive picture of the scheme. More damning were the records of David's involvement, evidence of payments made to ensure his cooperation, detailed instructions about controlling Richard's medication schedule to keep him compliant. The caregiver's nervous fidgeting increased as Emily examined these documents, his eyes darting between Nathan and the door. Atlas's behavior became increasingly strategic as the confrontation unfolded. The dog moved with calculated precision, maintaining optimal positions to protect both Richard and Emily, while keeping Nathan and David in his sight. His intelligence seemed almost human as he anticipated and countered their movements. Richard's voice cut through the tension, surprisingly clear and strong. "Margaret knew," he declared, holding up the pocket watch. "She knew you would try to take everything." Nathan's composed mask slipped completely at these words, revealing the desperation beneath. As Emily continued to examine the chamber's contents, she found a final letter from Margaret, addressed to Richard, but meant to be discovered at exactly this moment. The letter detailed every step she had taken to protect her husband's legacy, including her careful selection and training of a special guardian, one that would arrive when needed most. Atlas's ears pricked forward at the mention of his role, his devoted gaze moving between Richard and the letter in Emily's hands. The dog's presence in their lives, far from being a random occurrence, had been part of Margaret's careful planning all along. Thunder crashed outside as Emily began to organize the evidence, preparing to present it to the proper authorities. Nathan's desperate attempts to maintain control of the situation grew more obvious, while David's nervous energy suggested he might be reaching a breaking point. The revelation of Atlas's true purpose changed everything. As Emily read through Margaret's final letter, the pieces fell perfectly into place. The dog's arrival at the mansion hadn't been a coincidence. He had been specifically trained and prepared for this moment, a guardian sent to protect Richard when he needed it most. Nathan paced the study like a caged animal, his expensive shoes wearing paths in the ancient carpet. "This is ridiculous," he spat, attempting to maintain some semblance of control. "So you're going to trust the ramblings of a sick old man and some mutt?" But his voice trembled with barely contained panic as he watched Emily continue to extract documents from the hidden chamber. David stood frozen in the doorway, his medical bag hanging limply at his side. The evidence of his complicity lay exposed on the antique desk, bank statements showing suspicious deposits, correspondence detailing his role in the scheme, and carefully documented instructions about manipulating Richard's medication schedule. Atlas maintained his protective stance, his scarred body positioning itself strategically as Nathan's movements became more erratic. The dog's training was evident in every calculated movement, every subtle shift in position, to keep both Richard and Emily safe, while maintaining a clear view of both conspirators. Richard sat straighter in his wheelchair, drawing strength from Atlas's presence and the unfolding truth. "Margaret always said she would protect me," he said, his voice carrying the weight of renewed understanding. "She sent Atlas to guard not just me, but everything we built together." Emily carefully laid out the documents from the chamber, creating a clear timeline of Nathan and David's manipulation. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of calculated moves, all designed to take advantage of Richard's declining health and seize control of his fortune. Margaret had seen it coming and had meticulously prepared her countermeasures. Lightning flashed outside as Emily uncovered more of Margaret's preparations. The chamber contained not just evidence of wrongdoing, but a complete protocol for protecting Richard's interests. Every document had been carefully preserved, every transaction recorded, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence that would ensure justice. Nathan's composure crumbled further as he realized the extent of Margaret's preparations. His attempts to dismiss the evidence grew more desperate, his arguments becoming increasingly incoherent. David remained silent, his face pale as he watched years of deception unravel before his eyes. Atlas's attention never wavered as the storm continued to rage outside. The dog's presence seemed to fill the study with an almost tangible sense of protection, his training and intelligence manifesting in every alert movement. Margaret's letter had described him as a guardian angel in fur, and now Emily understood exactly what she had meant. Through the chaos of the moment, Emily found another document in the chamber, a detailed account of Atlas's training. Margaret had worked with specialized trainers, preparing him for this exact scenario. The dog's ability to recognize threats, protect Richard, and even guide Emily to crucial evidence had all been carefully planned and implemented. Richard's moments of clarity became more frequent as the truth emerged. "I remember now," he said, watching Atlas with newfound understanding. "Margaret told me someone special would come to protect me when I needed it most." The dog responded to his words by moving closer, maintaining his protective watch while offering comfort. The evidence from the chamber painted a clear picture of Nathan's scheme. He had been manipulating Richard's finances for years, laying the groundwork for a complete takeover of the estate. David's role had been to ensure Richard remained compliant through careful medication management, keeping him just confused enough to be easily controlled. Atlas's attention suddenly shifted to the window, his ears pricking forward at some sound beyond the storm. Emily followed his gaze to see police lights reflecting off the wet driveway. Margaret's final failsafe had been triggered. She had arranged for authorities to be notified if certain conditions were met, ensuring that justice would be served. Nathan's desperate attempt to maintain control finally collapsed completely. His carefully constructed facade of concern for his uncle shattered, revealing the calculating manipulator beneath. David seemed to shrink into himself, already beginning to formulate explanations and excuses for his role in the scheme. Emily gathered the most crucial documents from the chamber, securing them carefully as Atlas maintained his vigilant watch. The dog's presence had been the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy, exactly as Margaret had planned. His intelligence, training, and unwavering loyalty had brought truth to light and protected Richard when he was most vulnerable. The mansion's grand foyer filled with the steady presence of law enforcement officers as Nathan's carefully constructed scheme continued to collapse around him. His previous confidence had evaporated completely, replaced by a nervous energy that made him pace like a trapped animal. David stood apart, his medical bag abandoned on a nearby table, his professional demeanor crumbling under the weight of exposure. Emily worked methodically with the authorities, presenting the evidence from Margaret's hidden chamber. Each document told part of a larger story, a story of careful planning and protection that Margaret had put in place long before her departure. Atlas remained vigilant throughout the process, his trained eyes never leaving Nathan and David as they provided their statements. Richard watched the proceedings from his wheelchair, Atlas faithfully by his side. The old man's eyes held a newfound clarity as he observed the unraveling of the conspiracy that had threatened to strip away his legacy. "Margaret always said the truth would protect us," he commented, his hand resting on Atlas's head. "She sent us a guardian angel with 4 paws." The evidence proved overwhelming. Financial records showed a complex web of attempted manipulations, all designed to take advantage of Richard's vulnerable state. David's medical records revealed a pattern of over-medication intended to keep Richard confused and compliant. Margaret had documented everything, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence. As the truth emerged, Nathan's desperate attempts to maintain control became increasingly futile. His explanations grew more convoluted, each new justification contradicting the last. The polished facade of a caring nephew, concerned for his uncle's welfare, had completely crumbled, revealing the calculating manipulator beneath. David, seeing the futility of further deception, began to cooperate. His detailed confession confirmed everything Margaret's evidence had suggested, a coordinated effort to manipulate Richard's condition and seize control of his fortune. The caregiver's involvement had been secured through substantial payments and promises of future wealth. Atlas's behavior remained focused and professional throughout the proceedings. The dog's specialized training became even more apparent as he responded to the changing situation, maintaining optimal positions to protect Richard while keeping the conspirators in view. His intelligence and dedication were a testament to Margaret's foresight. Emily discovered more of Margaret's preparations as she continued to examine the hidden chamber's contents. There were contingency plans for every scenario, each one meticulously documented and legally verified. She had created an unbreakable network of protection around Richard and his estate, with Atlas as its living cornerstone. The most touching discovery was a video recording Margaret had left behind. In it, she detailed her suspicions about Nathan's true intentions and her plans to protect Richard. She spoke of Atlas's special training and selection, describing how the dog would arrive exactly when needed. "He'll know what to do," she had said confidently. "He'll protect Richard and help bring the truth to light." Richard's moments of lucidity became more frequent as the stress and manipulation of the past months began to lift. He spoke more clearly of Margaret's preparations, remembering conversations and warnings she had shared. Atlas responded to these moments of clarity with gentle encouragement, his presence helping to anchor Richard's scattered memories. The investigation revealed the full scope of Nathan's attempted takeover. He had spent years laying the groundwork, manipulating financial records and positioning himself to seize control of Richard's estate. David's role had been crucial, using his position of trust to keep Richard compliant and confused through careful medication management. Emily worked late into the night, ensuring that every piece of evidence was properly documented and secured. Atlas maintained his vigilant watch, his training evident in every calculated movement. The dog's arrival at the mansion had been the catalyst that set Margaret's protective plan in motion, exactly as she had intended. As the night wore on, the full impact of Margaret's foresight became clear. She had created a perfect defense against those who would take advantage of Richard's condition. Atlas had been her masterpiece, a guardian who combined intelligence, loyalty, and specialized training to protect Richard when he was most vulnerable. The following morning dawned clear and bright over Charleston, the storm's fury replaced by a gentle autumn breeze. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Nathan sat in the drawing room, his expensive suit wrinkled from the night's events, all pretense of familial concern abandoned. David occupied a chair in the corner, his medical bag confiscated, his role in the conspiracy fully exposed. Emily continued working with the authorities, methodically presenting the evidence Margaret had accumulated. The hidden chamber had yielded a wealth of documentation, financial records, correspondence, and legal papers that painted a clear picture of Nathan and David's scheme to seize control of Richard's fortune. Atlas maintained his protective vigil, his training evident in every calculated movement. The dog's presence had transformed from a curious addition to the household into the living embodiment of Margaret's protective planning. His intelligence and dedication had been crucial in exposing the truth and protecting Richard during his most vulnerable moments. Richard seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour, as if the weight of manipulation and deception had been lifted from his shoulders. "Margaret always knew what was coming," he said, watching Atlas with newfound understanding. "She made sure we wouldn't be alone when we needed help the most." The investigation revealed more details of Margaret's careful preparations. She had spent years developing a comprehensive protection plan, anticipating attempts to take advantage of Richard's condition. Atlas had been carefully selected and trained for his role, his arrival at the mansion timed to coincide with when the threat would be greatest. Emily discovered more of Margaret's recordings in the hidden chamber. Each video detailed another aspect of her protective strategy, including specific instructions about Atlas's capabilities and training. "He's more than just a guard dog," Margaret had explained. "He's a guardian who will understand exactly what needs to be done." The evidence against Nathan proved overwhelming. Financial records showed years of calculated manipulation, all designed to position himself to seize control of Richard's estate. His carefully constructed facade of concern had been a cover for a long-term scheme to exploit his uncle's vulnerable condition. David's confession filled in the remaining gaps. The caregiver had been recruited early in the scheme, his medical expertise used to keep Richard confused and compliant. Regular over-medication and careful manipulation of Richard's schedule had been designed to maintain his dependent state. Atlas's behavior throughout the proceedings demonstrated the full extent of his specialized training. The dog moved with purpose and precision, maintaining protective positions while responding to subtle changes in the situation. His intelligence and awareness went far beyond typical canine capabilities. Emily found Margaret's training records for Atlas, detailing the extensive preparation he had received. The dog had been taught to recognize specific threats, protect Richard, and even guide trusted individuals to important evidence. Every aspect of his behavior had been carefully planned and implemented. Richard's memory continued to improve as the stress of manipulation lifted. He spoke more clearly of conversations with Margaret, remembering her warnings about potential threats to their legacy. Atlas responded to these moments of clarity with gentle encouragement, his presence helping to strengthen Richard's recovering confidence. The full scope of Nathan's attempted takeover became clear as more evidence emerged. He had manipulated financial records, prepared false documents, and positioned himself to seize control of Richard's fortune. David's medical expertise had been crucial to the scheme, ensuring Richard remained in a manipulable state. As the morning progressed, Emily worked to secure Richard's immediate future. Margaret's preparations included detailed plans for his ongoing care and protection, with Atlas as a central figure in maintaining his security and well-being. The dog's training and dedication would continue to play a crucial role in Richard's recovery. Atlas's arrival at the mansion had been the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. His specialized training, combined with unwavering loyalty, had brought truth to light exactly as Margaret had planned. The dog's presence had transformed from a mysterious arrival on a rainy afternoon into the living embodiment of Margaret's love and protection. The Charleston morning sun streamed through the mansion's windows, casting warm light across the antique furnishings. The chaos of the previous day had settled into a calm determination. As Emily worked to implement Margaret's carefully laid plans for Richard's future care and protection, Atlas remained a constant presence, his specialized training evident in the way he maintained his protective watch while offering comfort to Richard. Nathan's scheme had been completely exposed, his carefully constructed facade of familial concern shattered by the weight of evidence Margaret had accumulated. The financial records from the hidden chamber revealed years of calculated manipulation, all designed to take advantage of Richard's vulnerable state. The polished nephew who had arrived with promises of help had been revealed as a patient predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. David's role in the conspiracy had become equally clear. The caregiver's medical expertise had been used to maintain Richard in a controllable state, his medications carefully managed to ensure compliance. The detailed records Margaret had kept showed how David had been gradually drawn into the scheme, his professional ethics compromised by promises of financial reward. Emily discovered more of Margaret's preparations as she continued to examine the contents of the hidden chamber. Each document revealed another layer of protection, another carefully considered safeguard designed to protect Richard and his legacy. Atlas's presence had been the masterpiece of her planning, a guardian who combined intelligence, loyalty, and specialized training. Richard's improvement continued as the burden of manipulation lifted from his shoulders. His moments of clarity became more frequent, his memories more accessible. "Margaret always said she would find a way to protect me," he remarked, watching Atlas guide Emily to another cache of important documents. "She knew exactly what I would need." The investigation into Nathan's activities revealed the full scope of his attempted takeover. Financial records showed a complex web of manipulated documents and suspicious transactions, all designed to position himself to seize control of Richard's fortune. His careful grooming of David as an accomplice had been particularly calculated, using the caregiver's position of trust to further his scheme. Atlas's specialized training became more apparent with each passing hour. The dog moved through the mansion with purpose and precision, his behavior demonstrating an understanding that went far beyond typical canine capabilities. His ability to recognize threats, protect Richard, and guide Emily to important evidence had been crucial in exposing the truth. Emily found more of Margaret's video recordings, each one revealing another aspect of her protective strategy. She had spent years preparing for the possibility of someone trying to take advantage of Richard's condition. Atlas had been carefully selected and trained as the cornerstone of her plan, his arrival at the mansion timed to coincide with the greatest need. The authorities continued their work, processing the evidence Margaret had accumulated. The documentation from the hidden chamber provided a clear timeline of Nathan's manipulation and David's complicity. Margaret's meticulous record-keeping had created an unbreakable chain of evidence that ensured justice would be served. Richard's recovery showed promising signs as the stress of the past months began to lift. His medication schedule, now properly managed, allowed his natural clarity to return in longer stretches. Atlas responded to these improvements with gentle encouragement, his presence helping to anchor Richard's strengthening grip on reality. The mansion itself seemed to breathe easier as Margaret's protective plans took full effect. The hidden chamber, now empty of its secrets, stood as a testament to her foresight and determination to protect her husband. Atlas had been her master stroke, a guardian who would arrive exactly when needed, bringing truth to light and ensuring Richard's safety. Emily worked to implement the next phase of Margaret's plans, focusing on establishing a secure and supportive environment for Richard's continued recovery. Atlas's role would remain crucial, his specialized training and unwavering loyalty providing the foundation for Richard's renewed independence and well-being. Throughout the day, more details of Margaret's careful planning emerged. She had anticipated every possible threat, prepared for every contingency. Atlas's training had been specifically designed to address the unique challenges Richard would face, combining protection with the emotional support he would need to recover from the trauma of manipulation. As autumn settled over Charleston, the mansion began to transform. The dusty corridors that had once held secrets now gleamed with renewed purpose. Emily had taken charge of implementing Margaret's comprehensive care plans for Richard, while Atlas continued his devoted vigilance, his specialized training evident in every calculated move. The evidence against Nathan and David had been processed, their elaborate scheme fully exposed. Margaret's meticulous documentation had created an airtight case, ensuring that justice would be served through proper legal channels. The hidden chamber's contents had revealed years of calculated manipulation, all thwarted by Margaret's careful planning and Atlas's timely arrival. Richard's recovery progressed steadily as his medication schedule returned to appropriate levels. His moments of clarity grew longer and more frequent, his memories becoming more accessible with each passing day. Atlas remained constantly at his side, the dog's presence providing both protection and emotional support during this crucial period of healing. Emily discovered more aspects of Margaret's protective strategy as she continued to sort through the documented evidence. Each new finding revealed another layer of her careful planning. "Margaret thought of everything," Richard commented, watching Atlas guide Emily to another previously hidden cache of important papers. "She knew exactly what we would need." The mansion's atmosphere shifted noticeably as Margaret's plans took full effect. The tension that had permeated the halls during Nathan's presence dissipated, replaced by a sense of security and renewal. Atlas's trained awareness never wavered, his protective instincts now focused on supporting Richard's recovery rather than defending against immediate threats. Further examination of Margaret's recordings revealed the extent of her preparations for Atlas's role. The dog had been specifically selected for his intelligence and temperament, then trained in a specialized program designed to meet Richard's unique needs. His abilities went far beyond basic protection, incorporating elements of emotional support and cognitive stimulation. Richard's improvement became more evident with each passing day. His engagement with his surroundings increased, supported by Atlas's constant companionship. The dog seemed to know instinctively when to encourage activity and when to provide calming presence, his training perfectly suited to supporting Richard's recovery process. Emily worked to implement the next phase of Margaret's care plan, which focused on creating a structured but nurturing environment. Atlas played a central role in this strategy, his specialized training helping to establish routines that supported Richard's growing independence while maintaining necessary safety measures. The authorities completed their initial investigation, impressed by the thoroughness of Margaret's documentation. Her foresight in preparing evidence had created an unassailable record of Nathan's manipulation and David's complicity. The legal process would move forward smoothly, ensuring that justice would be served through proper channels. Margaret's video messages continued to provide guidance as new situations arose. She had anticipated the challenges of Richard's recovery period and left detailed instructions for addressing them. Atlas's training had been specifically designed to adapt to these changing needs, combining protection with rehabilitation support. The mansion's gardens, long neglected during the period of manipulation, became a focus of recovery activities. Emily implemented Margaret's suggestions for creating a therapeutic environment, while Atlas watched over Richard's supervised walks among the reviving flower beds. The dog's protective instincts remained sharp, even as his supportive roles expanded. Richard's growing strength became evident in his increased participation in daily activities. With Atlas by his side, he began to reclaim parts of his life that had been overshadowed by manipulation and confusion. The dog's presence provided constant reassurance, his training ensuring the perfect balance of protection and encouragement. Throughout the recovery process, Emily continued to uncover more details of Margaret's careful planning. She had created a comprehensive support system, with Atlas as its living cornerstone. The dog's specialized training and unwavering dedication had proven essential not just in exposing the truth, but in supporting Richard's journey back to independence. The Charleston autumn painted the mansion's grounds in brilliant shades of red and gold, as recovery and renewal continued within its walls. Richard's improvement had become increasingly evident, his mind clearing as the effects of manipulation and over-medication faded. Atlas remained his constant companion, the dog's specialized training adapting seamlessly to support each phase of recovery. Emily's implementation of Margaret's care plans had transformed the mansion's atmosphere. The dusty corridors that once held secrets now buzzed with purposeful activity. Margaret's foresight had extended far beyond protecting Richard from immediate threats. She had created a comprehensive framework for his long-term well-being. The hidden chamber, now empty of its crucial evidence, stood as a testament to Margaret's careful planning. Every document had served its purpose, exposing Nathan's manipulation and David's complicity. Atlas's role in bringing these truths to light had proven essential, his specialized training making him the perfect guardian for both Richard and the evidence that protected him. Richard's connection with Atlas deepened as his clarity returned. The dog's presence seemed to strengthen his recovering memories, particularly those of Margaret. "She always said help would come when we needed it most," Richard remarked during an afternoon in the garden, Atlas attentive at his side. "She made sure we wouldn't face the darkness alone." More of Margaret's video messages emerged, each one revealing another layer of her protective strategy. She had anticipated not just the threats to Richard's estate, but the challenges he would face during recovery. Atlas's training had been specifically designed to address these needs, combining protection with therapeutic support. The mansion's grounds became a focal point for Richard's rehabilitation activities. Under Emily's supervision and Atlas's watchful eye, daily walks through the gardens became opportunities for both physical exercise and cognitive stimulation. The dog's protective instincts remained sharp, even as his role expanded to include supporting these recovery efforts. Emily discovered Margaret's detailed plans for the mansion's future. She had created a sustainable framework for Richard's ongoing care and protection, with Atlas as its cornerstone. The dog's specialized training ensured he could adapt to changing needs while maintaining his protective role. The legal process moved forward smoothly, supported by the overwhelming evidence Margaret had accumulated. Nathan's scheme to seize control of Richard's fortune had been fully exposed, along with David's role in maintaining Richard's vulnerable state through medication manipulation. Justice would be served through proper channels, exactly as Margaret had planned. Atlas's behavior continued to demonstrate the extraordinary extent of his training. The dog's ability to recognize and respond to Richard's needs went far beyond basic protection. His presence provided a perfect balance of security and emotional support, helping to anchor Richard's strengthening grip on reality. Richard's improving condition allowed him to share more memories of Margaret's preparations. She had spent years developing her protective strategy, anticipating attempts to take advantage of his vulnerable state. Atlas had been carefully selected and trained as the final piece of her plan, a guardian who would arrive precisely when needed. The mansion itself seemed to reflect the positive changes taking place within its walls. Rooms that had once felt oppressive with secrets now opened to light and renewal. Emily worked to implement Margaret's suggestions for creating a nurturing environment, while Atlas maintained his vigilant but gentle presence. Throughout the recovery process, more details of Margaret's careful planning came to light. She had created a network of protection that went beyond legal and financial safeguards, encompassing Richard's physical and emotional well-being. Atlas's specialized training and unwavering dedication had proven essential to bringing her protective strategy to fruition. New routines established themselves as autumn deepened. Richard's daily activities expanded under Emily's guidance and Atlas's protection. The dog's ability to adapt his support while maintaining security demonstrated the remarkable extent of his training and Margaret's foresight in selecting him for this crucial role. Winter approached Charleston with gentle breezes, the mansion's grounds transformed by the changing seasons. Inside, the final phases of Richard's recovery continued under the watchful eyes of both Emily and Atlas. The dog's unwavering dedication remained constant, his specialized training adapting seamlessly to each new stage of healing and renewal. The legal proceedings had concluded exactly as Margaret had planned. Her meticulous documentation had ensured a proper resolution through official channels. Nathan's scheme to seize control of Richard's fortune had been fully exposed, while David's role in the manipulation had been addressed through appropriate legal measures. Richard's improvement exceeded all expectations. His mind, freed from the fog of over-medication and manipulation, showed remarkable resilience. Atlas remained his constant companion, the dog's presence providing both protection and emotional support during this transformative period. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing day, fulfilling Margaret's vision of companionship and security. Emily continued to discover new aspects of Margaret's comprehensive care plans. Each revelation showed another layer of her remarkable foresight. She thought of everything, Richard often remarked, watching Atlas guide him through his daily routines. She made sure we would have exactly what we needed to rebuild. The hidden chamber, now secured and preserved, stood as a testament to Margaret's protective planning. Though empty of its crucial evidence, it remained a powerful reminder of her determination to protect Richard and his legacy. Atlas would occasionally pause near its entrance during his protective rounds, as if acknowledging the role it had played in bringing truth to light. Margaret's final video messages provided guidance for this transition period. She had anticipated the challenges of recovery and renewal, leaving detailed instructions for creating a supportive environment. Atlas's specialized training proved perfectly suited to these evolving needs, combining security with gentle encouragement. The mansion itself underwent a transformation. Rooms that had once held secrets now filled with light and purpose. Emily implemented Margaret's suggestions for creating a nurturing space, while Atlas maintained his vigilant but gentle presence. The atmosphere reflected the positive changes taking place within its walls. Richard's daily activities expanded under Emily's supervision and Atlas's protection. The dog's ability to adapt his support while maintaining security demonstrated the extraordinary extent of his training. Together, they established new routines that supported Richard's independence while ensuring his safety. The gardens became a special place of healing. Daily walks among the winter-blooming flowers provided opportunities for exercise and reflection. Atlas watched over these moments with trained awareness, his protective instincts perfectly balanced with his supportive role. Emily found Margaret's final letter, meant to be discovered at exactly this moment of renewal. In it, she expressed her complete faith in the protective system she had created, with Atlas as its living cornerstone. The dog's arrival at the mansion had set in motion exactly the sequence of events she had envisioned. Richard's strengthening clarity allowed him to fully appreciate the depth of Margaret's planning. She had created not just safeguards against manipulation, but a complete framework for his recovery and ongoing well-being. Atlas's specialized training and unwavering dedication had proven essential to bringing her protective strategy to fruition. As winter settled over Charleston, the mansion stood as a symbol of resilience and renewal. Margaret's careful preparations had ensured not only Richard's protection, but his restoration to independence and well-being. Atlas remained his faithful guardian, the dog's intelligence and training continuing to support each new phase of recovery. The story of Atlas's arrival on that rainy afternoon had become a testament to Margaret's love and foresight. What seemed at first like chance was revealed as part of her carefully orchestrated plan to protect Richard when he needed it most. The bond between man and dog had grown into exactly the relationship Margaret had envisioned, one of mutual trust, protection, and healing. Dear viewers, we hope this extraordinary tale of loyalty and protection has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist of equally compelling stories. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If you've enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the depth of human connection and the remarkable bonds we share with our four-legged guardians. Join us in the comments section below to share your thoughts on this touching tale of love, loyalty, and protection. Until our next story, remember that sometimes our greatest guardians come in unexpected forms.